Joining us, co-founder and director of economic policy at Veda Partners, Henrietta Treyz, White House and Foreign Affairs correspondent for Politico, Eli Stokols, and staff writer for The Atlantic and MS Now political analyst, Ashley Parker. The administration, Eli, is really trying hard to say that this is only temporary. Don't worry, this will get resolved. Donald Trump's been saying it a lot, but now J.D. Vance as well. How worried is the White House?
It was interesting to hear J.D. Vance just say, we know we have a problem, right? They're hoping that that's a short-term problem. I think a lot of the promising that this is going to be short-term is really just messaging and trying to, reassure markets to the extent they can. But it's clear from people who are looking at what's happening in Iran, watching the White House kind of desperately flail as they try to build a coalition and get anybody who can help secure the Strait of Hormuz, who can contribute to that effort. And as they recognize that the president does not really have a way to end this war, that the escalation calculation is now with Iran, and that it's not as easy as just the president deciding that the war is over. Iran has a say in this. So those are a lot of the reasons why people are concerned, why market analysts are concerned. And I think, the messages that you're hearing coming out of the White House betray some of that concern as well, even though they are trying to act outwardly as though things are calm, there is a plan. I think people who are looking and asking what the plan is, they're not really getting any clear answers on that.
So, Ashley, it's hard to quantify this. I mean, we have polling that shows how people feel about the war. Democrats don't like it. Independents don't like it. Republicans largely staying on the side of Donald Trump so far, at least. Not quite the same amount of support that he gets for other things among Republicans, but still. That being said, we played at the top of the show an incredible moment that our friends at Meet the Press Daily gathered from a woman at a gas station in Pennsylvania who's angry. She called the president a name, and she called herself dumb for voting for him for 3 times. It aligns with just some anecdotal evidence that I have of my own based on fervent Trump supporters who have never, ever, ever, ever broken with him ever, now starting to say, I'm not sure he's making sense when he's talking, which, I mean, I know it's a small thing, but the fact that it's coming at all is a big deal from folks like this. Does the White House see that shift, that those beginnings of a fracture? And if they're not worried about Donald Trump, because, maybe he's not running again, he's not technically allowed to, are they worried about the party?
Yes, absolutely. People close to the president, inside and outside the White House, particularly those on the political side and who deal with politics, are acutely aware of this dynamic and are acutely worried about it. And this is something actually in certain ways that preceded this most recent war in Iran, but this has certainly exacerbated it. So you now have this potent mix of the voters who are frustrated and said, one of the things I liked about this president is that he promised an end to forever wars. You have the economic issue, which was a challenge. I was talking to someone very close to the president on the political side, again, before the war in Iran, who was saying that his economic numbers were troubling when you looked at the landscape for the midterm. So again, you have economic concerns that the war in Iran only exacerbates. You have the war in Iran that a lot of people don't like and frankly feel is sort of doubly unnecessary at a moment when people are struggling back home. And you also have a lot of the legacy building stuff he's doing that voters in focus groups were hearing them in another world. If the economy were going better and we weren't embroiled in adventurism overseas, they might not care. But you're then hearing voters again in focus groups saying, look, I don't understand why he's spending all this time and money on the ballroom or, putting dirt for a new golf course in Washington when I'm hurting back home. So it's a potent mix, and it's not good for the White House. And worse than not being good for the White House, it's not good for these actual Republican candidates who are actually still on the ballot this year.
Yeah, and if the change in control of the House happens, the Democrats take it over, it could pose some issues for Donald Trump, investigations, hearings, and the like. Henrietta, let's talk about gas prices and whether they are transitory. J.D. Vance, acknowledged the problem, but said that they're going to come down quickly. Can they come down quickly if this war ends tomorrow and the strait is opened back up? What's the best case scenario?
Best case scenario is that 200 days from now, or roughly around Halloween, things are back to where they used to be before the bombing started. That's how disruptive the Iran war has been. And Iran's own oil and gas productivity and output has been bombed and is now shut in. And that's true in Kuwait, in Iraq, in Qatar, and a whole other host of these Arab-producing nations that either have tankers sitting in the Strait of Hormuz or just outside that can't move, or they have these entire wells that are shut in. And the same is true for fertilizer, for urea, for helium, for all the things that our agriculture industry, our jet fuels, our semiconductors, medical imaging equipment, all that stuff is locked in. And even if the war were to end tomorrow, that would still take an estimated 200 days to get back on track. This is not a snap your fingers and it's over situation. And the president is absolutely not acknowledging that. I, for one, am not heartened to hear Vice President Vance say this won't last forever. I would like some more clarity. They started off saying, maybe 2 weeks, then we got maybe 8 weeks from Hegseth, and now we're at not forever. That's not helping.
Henrietta, I was expecting you to say, it'll get back to normal in a week or 2 weeks. I was not expecting 200 days, which puts us, as you said, at Halloween, which is a political problem if you're paying this much more at the pump by Halloween when the midterms are just a week away.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing that's really disruptive is that we were on the ascent. We were getting inflation under control. Gas prices were coming down. We all remember how bad the pandemic was. If you want to reference the Biden administration, you could talk about inflation being high, but it had been on the descent. Now it is on the ascent, and oil and gas is getting absolutely pummeled. I mean, gas is at $4.17 in my best friend's hometown in Virginia. That's the direction we're heading in. And there are 2,000 to 2,500 Marines headed to the region right now. They'll be there in 2 weeks. This is continuing for a very long time. We're going to have crude in this $100 range for now at least a month and probably much longer than that with no end in sight.